penultimate day of Lit Fest. Thank you for joining us. I know a lot of you are fans of the Spelling Bee, and the Spelling Bee is going on right now. Last I heard, my team had one player left, but I think he may have been sacrificed. But anyway, thank you for being here. We're really excited. This is our second virtual Lit Fest. I hope I'm not disappointing anybody by saying I hope it's our last. I believe in going beyond our geographic borders, so we will always do live streaming and things like that, but it'd be nice to all be together under the tent, sharing some laughs and hearing some great readings. So thank you for joining us. There are a couple of things I wanted to say before we get started. One is we've got another reading tomorrow. We've got Leslie Jameson and Matt Johnson reading and in conversation at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So please join us for that. We also have some classes that are still, there may be a spot or two available. I think Torin will put links to those in the chat. We're doing our first, since the pandemic began, in-person party tomorrow, and it's going to be a very scaled back version of Lit Fest parties that you've ever attended, if you've ever attended them. Where it's going to be pizza, wine, LaCroix, and beer on the porch. And it's going to be in the mid-90s, so we'll be fanning ourselves, and no judgment if you're a little bit shiny tomorrow at the party. So Torin's going to put a link to that in the chat. And other than that, we, as always, want to thank the SCFD, the National Endowment for the Arts, Colorado Creative Industries, and Book Bar is our book selling partner this year. So all of the readers tonight, we're going to be putting the links to their books that you can purchase from Book Bar. And if you put Lit Fest in the little comments column or whatever, we get extra kudos from them. They like us and they send us good vibes. So do that, please. And also throughout the reading, if questions occur to you, save them, and we're going to talk after the reading, so you'll get a chance to either put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask yourself. It's up to you. But right now, what we're going to do is hear from these three readers. Those of you who know that Evelyn Hampton was supposed to be here tonight, she's not feeling great. So let's all send our healing vibes her way. Nothing serious, she's just, I think, tired. So we're going to start with Sanel Barnes. She is a formerly undocumented memoirist, essayist, and educator from Manila, Philippines, and is the author of Monsoon Mansion, a memoir, and Malaya Essays on Freedom, and the editor of last year's New York Times new and noteworthy book, A Measure of Belonging, 21 Writers of Color on the New American South. She is currently at work on a nonfiction narrative book on climate justice, the Philippine water crisis, and Philippine spirituality and folklore. Let's give it up to Sanel.
Thank you so much for that sweet introduction. And I'm happy to be here. I miss going to Denver, and I remember that reading I was in a couple years ago under the tents, and I think after my reading, my agent was also giving a talk that weekend, and he said, "Are you sure you don't want to transition to stand-up? Because that was such a good time, and maybe you have a feature in comedy," which is really funny because if you've read my work, it's almost always drama and almost always has something to do with grief and pain and loss and all that kind of stuff. And I remember telling him, well, humor comes from pain, right? Maybe that's why I'm so funny. But you all at Denver indulged me and laughed at all my jokes. And today, maybe you won't laugh so much with me, but maybe at me as I try to calm down a rambunctious cat and rabbit who are both free roam right now. So I apologize in advance if they're a little bit crazy. But today is also Philippine Independence Day, a big day for the Filipino and Filipino American communities. And I thought to celebrate it, I'd read something new. And this is the third chapter from a work in progress that is yet entitled, but it's about the about climate justice, the Philippine water crisis, and Philippine spirituality and folklore. And I wrote this at the end of March of this past year, which also happened to be around the same time that the Atlanta massacres happened. So this is how I responded to kind of that year marker of lockdown and the Atlanta massacres. I have an other world. Mostly, though not completely, recovered from COVID. I wake up speaking in the languages of this realm. Umaga na, I say, as I roll over to kiss my husband awake. I say it at daybreak, the sweetness of my mother tongue lolling out of my slightly parted lips, leaching out and rescinding like sweet baby drool. I don't yet know this, that as a symptom of long COVID, I don't completely exit dream sense each morning, sporadically speaking throughout the day in Tagalog, my home country's national language and my home region's dialect. I don't make sense of it until my husband asks what it means. What means? Language can be a touchy subject in our relationship. He's a white, Southern-born linguist and world languages teacher, and I'm an immigrant. He's theory, I'm praxis. It is when I burn my wrist pulling a cookie sheet out of the oven that I actually hear myself. I hear another fugitive language, another part of this fugitive love. Okinana. The saltiest of words because, for one, it is from my estranged, mentally ill, criminal, biological mother's northern dialect. It is also a word with no smooth contours, sonically nor sonically. Write it in cursive, and what you get is spike after spike, even at the tips of its supposedly round penultimate and ultimate vowels. Quad-syllabic, each quarter a jab, a slit in the air, a f at the end of a slash. I am the dirty mouth in their little family of three, but this getaway word gets even me. It's a modest shock, this word's effect, but big enough to jolt me when I'm fixing a batch of sweets. Was I just cursing in my mother's tongue? Mother, mother tongue, motherland. I'm nowhere near any of them now. I'm where I've landed. I'm in the Carolinas, a decade into, oddly because we were both polyglots, an English-speaking marriage with a white Carolinian. It's been almost just as long that I've been in this motherhood that feels much like swimming to the end of an infinity pool, paddling toward a Filipino identity with a child on my back, only to be pulled by the rip and the tide of southernness, whiteness, the America that wants me to forget who it is exactly that I am and where it is exactly that I am from. How it is exactly that I sound. I drown a little so she doesn't. This is what droves of immigrant parents before me have done. Submerge the past. But maybe this is wrong. I ask myself often, can I be a good person if I don't know myself? Back home, the other world, people like to say, ang di lumilingon sa pinanggalingan, di makakarating sa paroroonan. The person who doesn't look back to their origins will not arrive at their destination. I tried to look back. I wrote a memoir, a childhood written in translation, mostly in English for a loosely defined, which means narrowly selected or favored, American audience. The very act of writing memoir is its own translation work, from the experience to the remembered and the accounted, from then to now, from life to art, from me to you. In the case of my debut book, it was also a practice in translation from one tongue to another, from there to here, from a that to a this that are inequivalent, much like how Luc Sante describes his work and life in lingua franca. He said, "In order to write of my childhood, I have to translate. It is as if I were writing about someone else. As a boy, I lived in French. Now I live in English. The words don't fit because languages are not equivalent to one another. Although English is our trade and instruction language, as the Philippines was purchased by the United States from Spain, along with the Panama Canal and Puerto Rico, and we became twice colonized, then anglicized, and in many aspects made capitalist and America obsessed. Our English back home has always had its own inflections, intonations, prefixes, suffixes. We greet our teachers and elders. Good morning po. Perhaps our most spoken words are, because food is the center from which all Philippine life emanates. Sige, eat na. Dangling like an earring in the lobe of the listener's ear, or like the soft knob at the back of the speaker's throat, Tagalog is the inflection, the finish, is our primal, though not first, since there isn't a unifying national first language that cups English where it spells, cinches or tethers it where it is loose, or urges it out when it can't say what it means to say, as in, basta, I don't love you na. As a little girl obedient to and enamored by my nanny, who only spoke in Tagalog and Bisaya to me, I spoke in more Tagalog than what my upper class classmates or our classist society preferred. Once, a girl taller and lighter skinned than me bent down to come close to my face and mock me. Can you understand my English, or are you dumb? That was the first time I felt ashamed of my mother tongue, of sharing something with my working class and beloved nanny, who my parents could not afford, but who stayed as long as she could without pay to look after me. It was the first time I was bullied into forgetting my nature and my nurture, perhaps the first time I voluntarily succumbed to the colonization of my heart, my mind, my body, my voice. And I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
Oh man, that was amazing, Sanel. For those of you who don't know, Sanel also teaches regularly at Lighthouse, and I always hear she teaches a class on, writing stuff that might be traumatic and how to protect yourself while you're writing it. And people just adore your teaching and always talk about how generous you are as a person. And I think that comes through in that story. Just beautiful. Thank you. Okay, the next reader is Tiao Lim Go. She's the author of 2 poetry collections, Islanders and Faraway Places, which I think is the one that's soon to come out. Her essays, no? Is that right?
This one?
Faraway Places. Oh, it's out.
Yeah. Well, it's out on Tuesday.
Okay. So soon, meaning in a few days.
Yeah.
Soon to come out. Her essays, poetry, and criticism have been featured in Tin House, Catapult, Los Angeles Review of Books, PBS NewsHour, and The New Yorker. She's a fabulous person, and we're excited to have her here. Let's give it up for Tiao.
Oh, thanks, Andrea, for introducing me, and thanks everyone for being here. I will start off with a few poems from Faraway Places, which we just discussed, is out on Tuesday. So if you order it today, you get it soon. So in some ways, if you ask me like what this book is about, I think of this as an accidental manuscript, in the sense that many of these poems were created from what I would think of as like found text in my own drafts. And I realized when I started, it took me about 10 years to put it together, but I realized when I started putting it together, it kind of allowed me to access maybe something I might not have accessed otherwise. But I'll get down to the poems. Daybreak. Listen to the gnats and bees, the warbling, foxes and rabbits, their little trumpet ears, folding the blue of the sky. All at once, the sounds die. Black orchid. There are no black flowers, only the darkest shades of purple or red. We look at flowers as a way to know where we are. In the orchid garden, winter never arrives. Gardeners work quietly to remove traces of dirt and decay. The messes of mortality remain hidden, but a secret seeps back in. Borders. The sea is the edge of land and the beginning of another world. I live inland. When I go to the sea, I want to disappear into the blue, live with the whales and seals. I hold my breath as waves crash around me, slip in my hands. In the water, I dream of rocks. They cut my fingers and I bleed. The surge will return, but the water will hold me. I learn to swim. Cottonwoods. Maybe the trees would tell you of water on the plains, pockets of streams and ditches and deep taproots where life can be sustained. Trees stay in one place all their lives. They weather the wind and rain and sun that blows, stay in one place, they seem to say, and others will crush your breath and body. But they claw at the sky, still hanging on the last leaves. Stars. Neither of us knows the stars. You think you see the Milky Way, a brush of glitter in the obsidian of night. I think I see Orion, specks of light, or is that a satellite? In stars, we navigate the dark. In constellations, we tell stories about the stars. Those who know the Lord can use them to find their way in the world. But I cannot seem to remember. Midnight. The sand will say the land is always shifting. Cliffs crumble into the sea. Waves scrape caves on the shore. At night, the sea brings in a whale jaw, kelp still tangled in its teeth. Sinews fall from the bone, minnows dart in the flesh. The sand will say the waves will not wash it away, and the moon descends. Okay, I'm going to transition and read a couple poems from, this is my first book, Islanders. It came out, back in 2016. And it is on the history of Chinese immigration, of Chinese exclusion at the Angel Island Immigration Station in the San Francisco Bay. When I wrote this book, it was a book of history, and it came out in 2016 and became a book on current affairs. And hopefully it's moving back towards history, but we'll see. In a wooden building. So I wait on Angel Island, this island of immortals. The grass is dry and golden. Waves score the headlands, and the sea churns around me. The children, now a year older, a year beyond their father, another year without me. Each day we knit in silence, socks for the children, hats for the parents, and our words swirl in the sea. A brush and a bottle of ink. I took them when he died. He loved to write. What would he say if he were me? I open the bottle, I dip in the brush, I write on the walls. I tell the story of a widow alone in a prison at sea. I tell the story of long nights, wanting my children with me. I imagine him in heaven. I write to forget the tedium, and maybe one day you'll remember me. The waves. His father died suddenly, leaving a sick wife and 4 young girls. He decided to go to America, stake a claim on Golden Mountain, and come back for me. He wrote to me of Angel Island, where officers scrutinized his papers and doctors made him stand naked as they inspected his eyes. He built a business selling groceries, sent money home, and came back to marry me. I flew up on the sea. He calmed me, made love to me. The first time I cried silently. I had not been with another man, but I knew he had a woman. What could I do? There was no land in sight. San Francisco, the green hills of late spring on the verge of a golden splendor. The city rose from the sea, veiled in a hazy blue. They let him land from the ship, but I had to board a ferry. They didn't even let us say goodbye. There's nothing we can do. Foreign wife of a Chinese merchant, your case is automatically denied. At night, I watched the sea. I want its embrace. Cold, dangerous, overwhelming. In these waves, I will finally be home. And I will read one more. It's called The Walls Speak. The year I turned 14, father took me out of school. I scrubbed the floors, washed the clothes. At night, by candlelight, I snuck in my brother's books, dreaming of a faraway land where I could read and write. Here the fog obscures the full moon and the stars. The sea spins a song of solitude and pain. I wait for my turn to enter the land of the free. At night, by candlelight, I write in a notebook I hide. On the walls, I see poems, brushed in ink, carved on wood, laments of lost women stumbling in the world. I read their stories and weep. Each time I pick up the knife, ready to etch my words into the wood, my hands tremble and I step back. At night, I lie awake. Will I always be a secret? Well, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Man, unbelievable, Teo. Thank you for that. I've heard you read from Islanders a lot. I loved hearing the new stuff, and Islanders just, man, it just gets me every time. Thank you for sharing that, and look forward to talking about it after. Okay, so
Well,
our
thanks.
final reader is Karen Miriam Goldberg, the 2009 to 2013 Kansas Poet Laureate. She's the author or editor of 24 books, including the newly published How Time Moves, New and Selected Poems, as well as Miriam's Well, a novel, Needle in the Bone, a nonfiction book on the Holocaust, The Sky Begins at Your Feet, a memoir on cancer, community, and coming home to the body. Founder of Transformative Language Arts, she leads writing workshops widely, coaches people on writing and right livelihood, and consults on creativity, and also occasionally teaches at Lighthouse, which we really appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Andrea and Torin. It is an honor to read with Tao and Sanel. I'm just so deeply moved by your poetry and your memoir. This is called Your Body is a Conversation with the World. What are you waiting for? From the first air in the first room, while a winter radiator breathed enough warmth for you and your mother, the world was chatting you up. You gasped, you cried, you waved your tiny hands for the ocean you left, and the story laughed itself silly in each cell until it multiplied into millions more, marching to or denying the heart's measured drum. Your body watches the moth on the other side of the screen, drinks the water from the blue glass, and jumps in its sleep. So much dialogue in this continuing tender reckoning of barefoot on gravel, whippoorwill telling the ears of nightfall. You're always in conversation about how you're not a separate animal, but a talisman of your own place along the freeway and the prairie. Each step another word, each shrug another question for the lightning bug caught on the ceiling, the cat leaping refrigerator to your shoulder, the wind or its absence evident in the grasses. The answers may knock you over or have nothing to do with the question you're pacing across the day. Time tells its story through your body, so yoked to this love that it cannot stop singing. Light. Every act an exchange of light with light, Stan says, as we sit on lawn chairs in the sun. Gravity catches everything, the falling down, the fear of harm, the harm anyway along lines thought tapless, non-existent, all made from flecks of light, even our comfortable bones, magnet to the sun, the moon, whatever catches the light. Everything we see travels this way, the shimmering starling landing on the roof, the first pin oak detaching, the pebbles under our feet, the squirrels gathering their winter all fall. Light makes one live moment out of a dead one as we sit under the sun, miniaturized from the 8 minutes it takes to land here. When I fall asleep, when I fall in love, when I fall in the hall and catch myself, it's all gravity, which loves us so much it can't help but pull us close, show us the floor, then how to draw on the light to push ourselves back up. I worked on this new collection about time for, 12, 13 years, and it was actually going to press when the pandemic started. And I ended up writing a whole new section for it called Pandemic Time. And this poem is kind of in tune with that. And it's called Thresholds. Charles stumbles from bed to table to bed, his sister-in-law again explaining to him why he can't go up the stairs anymore or down the summer street without clothes, which don't make sense to him since crossing the threshold of all this pain. A spray of lightning bugs ignites broken stitches across the dark while I walk the gravel drive to my mother-in-law's house to tell her aide about the bouquet of mini strokes or something else no one diagnoses, because what would it matter now? When I step over the threshold into Charles's house, He puts his hand over his heart and bows. He knows he's dying, and in a week or month, he'll just be an outline no one can fill between bed and table, like my mother-in-law lingering for what will be years until she breathes her early morning over. Outside all of this, inside too, all the gears of blossom keep turning, all the doors continually open wide, and not just to death or disappearance. The world keeps telling us how much there is to step through. What the mostly blind eye sees. Yes, it can see its way out of a paper bag, but not more than a wavering center line on the highway. The good eye has to drive solo. It sees fast torches where once there were trees, and later raining streaks of yellow from track lighting in the restaurant. The mostly blind eye isn't bothered by the lack of definition between sofa and turquoise wall, the rectangle of green punctuated by branches filling the frame of the window, or the absence of a word on the exit sign. Instead, it sees trembling amoebas that it swears it saw as a child eye, falling in love with eddies of dust singing the sunlight. It sees right through forced forgiveness or hyacinth exploded into fragrance and pink too early. It sees nothing of the future, but is smart enough not to be perturbed by this, or by the presence of floaters that turn into faces full of better eyes, but not necessarily better views. Like now, when it sees the dark green panorama of cricket song turning into lightning bugs, the smell of cedar between thumb and forefinger, the heavy drape of humidity that doesn't lead to rain, and the tumbling barn sparrow song roosting in the treetops, begging the sky for long life. And this is the final poem I'll read, which just took a leap away from me. So hold on a second. Well, another poem popped up. This is the final poem I'll read. What you need is here. In the last buzz of bees and cicadas, everyone naps, dogs and humans, snakes in the sunny field, Osage orange leaves dreaming down. A bird in the tree is worth more than its weight in song, while wind sheds another layer of the old year so the new one can pour into us. I wake and start to hum, the afternoon steady as limestone, also rolling through time. Old wishes for worth or proof, ashes sparked upward from a dying fire, dissolve. The new yearnings have yet to land in the absence of hunger. When I try to imagine what to prepare for, I can only hear the yawn of distant cars on asphalt. I can only see a spider working something out of nothing, an airplane miles above, insect stories below, ferrying the past out of its confines to the next landing. Something beyond names or wishes sings to the beauty that passes bird to power line, the possibility right now as ever for love to join the chorus. Thank you so much.
Oh my goodness. So fabulous, all three of you. I'm just so humbled by this reading that is so momentous in so many ways. Can we bring everybody back to the screen here? That's great. And those of you who are here, and I appreciate people coming. Those of you who are not here, you're going to see this on Facebook or on our YouTube channel. So we contain multitudes, I'm sure. If there are questions for our three readers, please feel free to either unmute yourself and ask them or put them in the chat and we'll get to them. But I'm dying to know, because all three of you, I mean, let's face it, you write stuff that matters. And you're all teachers. So I wonder, what do you say to writers who don't feel like their stories matter? And do you always feel the kind of magnitude of the work that you're working on? I mean, we've got everything from life and death, we've got immigration, we've got, you know, we've got a lot of different topics in your guys' writing, and it's all very personal and rhythmically, you know, conveyed, and there's no shortage of just beautiful craft in all of your work, but your subject matter is just beyond reproach. So I'm wondering, are there times you worry as you're writing that this doesn't reach the level that I've already set for myself? Or are there things that are kind of throwaway? How do you know what you're going to focus on? And maybe we could start with Sanel, because she's unmuted.
Yeah, there's so many ways. Thank you for that question. It's one about resonance and craft, and really touches a little bit on, you know, what I taught today about scope, and especially with the essay form, right? There's like kind of this need to be relevant somehow. But I don't think of that first. I think of that much later on in the process. Something that I include, an exercise I include in every class I teach, is one in which I ask participants to write down the names of no more than 6 people in their ideal audience. And that's all I think of ever. No more than 6. Sometimes it's 2 people. And I've learned that my most powerful work happens when, and powerful to me, I'm not even concerned if it's resonant universally. It's the most honest, and also sounds most like me, which I guess is what comes off as like beautiful or lyric or whatever, when I am writing to myself, and then to my daughter, and then the other 4 people change depending on what I'm working on, and who I'm in dialogue with. But yeah, I'm filling it in the house, that's right. But yeah, and a friend told me recently, and he's not in the writing world at all. In fact, he's in advertising, so completely different universe he's in. He's all about like 6-second stories, you know, and he told me the other day, I read your books to know how I need to communicate through these 6-second spots. And so, well, I don't yet know how to react to that, but thank you. But since you're my friend and I know you, I know what you're trying to say, and what you're trying to say is that we've been in conversation before, and what's relevant to me is relevant to you, and so it's relevant to your art, even though we're in completely different forms. So I think that's what I think of mostly. I also don't, as an immigrant, I don't have heirloom, and so everything I write is, to me, whatever I write, that's what I'm going to hand off to my daughter one day, if I haven't already. But yeah. Thank you.
I love that. That's your heirloom. I love that. Karen, it looks like you're unmuted.
Sure. Well, I've been working with writers and people who don't consider themselves writers, and people who are terrified to even entertain the notion. I work especially with people living with cancer and serious illness, as well as other populations. And what I tend to tell everybody is that when you're writing in your own words, when you're finding what that story is, what those guiding images are, what that driving rhythm is that feels like home, the work will be powerful. And I do have a lot of people that come to me, and all of us who teach writing probably have this, who say, can you read this and tell me if it's good enough that I should even continue? And I remember being that person myself. I remember running up to Anne Waldman when I met her like 40 years ago and said, could you read my poems and tell me, are they good enough? Even though I would have continued no matter what. So I understand that impulse, but I also speak to them about how this is a practice. We show up, we create something. Do we know if it's good? Sometimes it feels amazing, and then you read it over a week later and you're like, oh. Sometimes we think it's a bunch of crap, and then we look and realize, oh my gosh, I'm onto something here I never even knew. And writing itself is a way of knowing, and the practice of writing can be an emotional, an artistic, a spiritual practice, a healing practice that will hold you and save you your whole life. And as far as, is it good enough? You know, I try to encourage people to take their time and take in all they're hearing about their work and really sit in discernment and develop their own critical sense, which I'm sure all of us agree that's part of your own power, your own sense of who you are and how you see. So I'll just leave that there.
That's beautiful. And I would just add to that, it's a lifelong journey to get there, right? To trust in the self and to believe in your own work. That's beautifully said. Tiao.
So first of all, this new book is literally came out from my discarded drafts. So even if you discarded something at some point of time, it doesn't mean that it can be repurposed at a future time. But, to the bigger question of, how do you know, your work is good and why does it matter and all that? One thing I always say in my classes is that writing and publishing are two different things. And, when you write, you want to focus on, what feels most true and most powerful to you. I mean, once you start thinking about publishing, there's other considerations, and that's a whole different conversation. But without writing, there isn't any publishing. So, so when you focus on the writing, and I feel that, I don't think it's so much the subjects that are important, but it's how you approach it. So, even if you're writing something that might seem, at least on the surface, like something mundane or, something everyday, but it's, what you bring to it, the vulnerability that you show that, matters more than, like this is, about X, so to speak. And everything else I had to say has been already said in ways much better than I can put it. So
I totally don't believe that, but I appreciate the gesture. You're dittoing a lot of what has been said.
yeah.
That's cool. And I love that idea of what matters most is that you pursue what feels most true. And that gives the momentousness to even things that don't seem like so, relevant or newsworthy or whatever. I love.
And can I just add to that too? Sometimes you might start out feeling that, this is not anything important, but if you actually feel that there's something in there, you go into it, maybe you'll find something that, is momentous and important.
I love that.
So.
I love that. Thank you. As a friend of mine once used to say, it's just a matter of drafts. Just keep digging, keep working at it. Okay, so I have some questions. Oh, Gloria asks, how do we protect that vulnerability that makes writing true? And anyone who, oh, Karen has unmuted, so I'm going to call on her, and then Sanel, please.
I think that's such a phenomenal question, because it is that vulnerability that's also the courage. And to steal from Brene Brown, there's no courage without vulnerability. And so how do we protect that? I think when we really get to those big vulnerable spots in our writing, we practice radical self-care. We take good care of ourselves. We really feel out how to care and feed the vulnerable writer out there on the page. We take breaks, we take naps, we watch a funny video. It's also very important with very vulnerable material not to show it to the wrong people too quick. To really take your time and be very careful in deciding who you're going to read it to or share it with. And I've had a lot of very difficult things that I've written, whether about the Holocaust or my own double bouts through different cancers. And I find reading it out loud to my husband, even if he falls asleep, which I don't take personally, just happens, because it's late at night and he wanted to go to sleep, and here I am reading to him. It just helps me to hear those words out loud with another person, not jumping in and telling me what to do too much. And one other thing I just want to add is, and I'm sure we all already know this in our bones, sometimes it's not the right time to write something deeply vulnerable. Sometimes we have to circle around and do something else and then come back to it. So it's that constant dialogue with our souls about what's ready, what's brave, what am I called to do?
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you for that. Sanel.
Yeah, thank you for that. When I teach a whole course on Mr. Lighthouse called Boundaries and Strategies for Writing Stories of Trauma and Memoir. And if I had to take a handful of takeaways from that course, it would be one of the things I always encourage writers to do is to have a defined start and stop time. I know that sometimes you get really in the feels if you're really being vulnerable, but having a defined start and stop time allows it to be possible again, because it's about practice and it's about possibility. You're like a marathon. You're not trying to somewhere. You're trying to pace yourself so you can finish the race, right? And so that you'll run another race. I don't run, so I don't know why I always love these. I've never, ever run. I hate running. Another technique or tool is the index card, which I have like so many of. That's how I started writing Monsoon Mansion. In the course of 6 years, I wrote on index cards because it was unintimidating. That's all I needed to fill each time. It amounted to about, now I think what became that book was about 5 shoeboxes of 3x5 index cards. And sometimes it would be something like mother, daughter, water, 3 words. And sometimes it would be something like, I would pretend to write an intro to a project in this creative nonfiction book that is part reportage, part prescriptive, and largely contemplative and lyrical. And then sometimes it's a lot deeper than that, and I'll actually build out a scene or a character sketch on an index card. But an index card is so not intimidating. You can put it in your back pocket. You can put it in this baby stroller. You can put it in your fanny pack if you're like me and you have one of these when you go to Trader Joe's. Put it in there. Sometimes saying things out loud, and that's a narrative therapy technique, is really helpful. So I know Alexander Chi does this too. Talking into the memo app on your phone is sometimes easier than the tactile practice of holding a pen, and sometimes you need the tactile practice of holding a pen. Self-care, I agree. Also fight for your rights to proper self-care as well, and allow others to fight for your rights there. Sometimes it's even too hard for me to afford myself self-care, and afford in every sense of the word, but also just we get used to not taking care of ourselves, right? And I had to get used to taking care of myself. And I think the last thing I'll say is that I also have kind of these not just these verbal contracts with people in my life, people that I love. With my husband, there are certain things I will never write about us, and that's sacred to us, and that's ours. And with my daughter too, and my daughter's 9 now, and I ask for permission now if I'm writing about her and including her, even just saying the word daughter in anything, just so I can honor her privacy as well. Yeah, those are just some things that I mentioned in that class.
I feel like I just got to take the class. Thank you for that. And I don't know if you saw in the chat, Kara Lopez-Lee said this index card thing just popped a lid off for me. Thank you for sharing that. So, so brilliant. Thank you. Tiao, do you want to add to this or?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So a couple things. First is that, the class that I typically teach at Lighthouse, I call it Difficult Personas. And it's using persona poetry to access difficult material, which is like, kind of the fictional mask. And sometimes, and again, I always say up front, it's just one strategy of many. And sometimes putting on that mask helps you kind of get out of yourself and really access the deeper emotions, the intensities. It's not a method that's going to work in every situation, but that's one of the things that you can do. And then I know everyone talks about self-care. The one thing that I think it's very easy to forget is kind of the emotional, psychological labor of writing, because writing isn't just about churning out words or meeting a word count, but there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into it. And sometimes after an intense writing session, you can't just be like dashing out to like go do something else. So you kind of need to have that time to kind of recharge, rejuvenate, which is different people do it differently. For me, it's I find that physical activity helps me like get out of my mind. And for me, I'm a skier, so especially in the winter, now it's summer, it's different. But sometimes if you're just that exhausted, you just need to take a nap. I think it was Mary Carr who said when she wrote The Liars Club, she took so many naps just because she was psychologically exhausted by working on the book.
That's great. Yeah, as I recall, when she was at Lighthouse, she said she would take those naps on the floor, which made it even more dramatic. So thank you for that. So we really only have time for one more question. Sanel took a nap between festival events today, which I highly encourage and endorse. So we only have a couple minutes, so I'm just going to go with this short question of, have you had a surprising source of inspiration recently that we should all know about and be inspired by too? It can be something you're embarrassed by too, I have to say, if it's, or something. Oh, go ahead, Sanel.
Yeah, I'll go because I was like, oh, there's nothing. And then I realized, wait, I did write that essay. But I wrote an essay for Catapult about 6 months ago, and it was about a cyber crime that actually happened to us in the middle of the pandemic. And so imagine being on lockdown and then also your bank account being emptied from somewhere in the world, and you're losing physical contact with people and losing everything. But I thought I was going to write something either investigative, because cyber crimes, I think with life migrating online during lockdown, I thought that, cybercrimes, I think, went up by like more than 50% just within the first quarter of 2020. And I thought I was going to write something investigative and like a long journalism piece, and I ended up writing about play and how in the exhaustion of figuring out what it meant to live in the pandemic and figuring out what it meant to lose our life savings from like 10 years of working so hard and everything just, you know, down the drain or out somewhere in some void somewhere. Someone opening an account under my name in Cambodia. I found solace in the reciprocity of play with my daughter and with our pets, and that essay was eventually entitled "Resistance Can Be Playful Too," which is something that I learned, that even in relevant, you know, nonfiction work, you can be joyful and you can be playful. And in the face of a crime and so much trauma, you can laugh. Yeah, I think that's my.
That's amazing. We'll try to find that link and send it. I'm really hoping there was some remedy for that and you got your, yeah, okay, good. I was like, I can't accept that the life savings is gone forever. Okay.
8 months, 6 lawyers and the FBI, but it's all done.
You can fix problems that arise in your life. Okay, that's great. Thank you for that, Sanel. Either Tiao or Karen, do you have something? Oh, Torin already, he's a magician. He already found the link. So everybody follow that and read this essay. Tiao.
Well, I have not finished it yet, but I am working on an essay on cat pictures, and it it started out as a joke, and I realized that it's a lot more than not a joke.
So if we want to learn more, we need to read that essay as soon as you're done with it.
Yeah, I have a bunch of stuff on my plate right now, so I don't have the time to finish it, but I hopefully will finish it by the end of this year. So
you guys, it all comes back to cats. And Karen, any final thoughts you want to leave us with?
Yes, I was just thinking that a few hours ago we met the parents of our son's girlfriend, and they're from Mexico, and actually indigenous people from Mexico, and they don't speak English. I don't speak Spanish, or not while. And we sat on this table, eating ice cream together, smiling, showing pictures of flowers we grew or loved to each other on our phones back and forth. And sometimes just being with people where the whole exchange of how we talk is totally different, because it's much slower when you're much more careful with what you say when everything has to be translated or has to be emoted in some way. And I'm going to take a few days off to go work on some new poetry, and I think those rhythms might stay with me.
Gosh, you guys, this is so amazing. I was just thinking like Hacks or something on HBO Max. So I'm really glad you guys had deeper answers than I thought of off the top of my head. Thank you to these. Everybody can unmute themselves and cheer for these 3 readers.
Yay! Thank you.
Yeah, and check out their books, and thank you for attending, and we will see you tomorrow at the final Lit Fest events. Take care, everyone. Check out some cat pictures.